Here we can actually take a look at the magnet and put the magnetic viewing film on top of it. Here you can actually see the plane of inertia right here. Here's one pole, here's another pole. Of course, you know how it looks after hundreds and hundreds of videos underneath the supercell. A magnet doesn't actually have poles. Well, sure it does. Every magnet has a north pole and a south pole. Well, if it did, it would be located there. And if it were located there, then you could cut this magnet in half and you'd have a north pole side and a south pole side, but it doesn't work that way because you could cut it a million times if it were possible. And each, of course, slice would have a, quote, north pole and a, quote, south pole. What a magnet actually has is the inverse to counter space, which of course is polarity, which is a three-dimensional S-curve. In other words, the plane of inertia, which is the inverse of magnetic centrifugal divergence, which of course forms the geometry of this. The toroid is a cross-section of a toroid, or a donut shape, and this is of course what the magnetic field looks like, right? It's toroidal. It's a centrifugal divergence, yeah. Centrifugal divergence. This is the geometry of force and motion. And the opposite to that, let me move the magnet out of the way, would be the geometry of increasing inertia and acceleration. So you have the conjugate geometry, sorry if I don't draw this perfectly, on every magnet, which of course is this hyperboloid here, or an hourglass shape. This is the geometry of increasing inertia and acceleration. This is towards the plane of inertia, right? You notice it actually makes this interesting cross. And of course, I don't know if you know how much you know about the right-hand rule, and of course I've got this a little bit messed up now. Let's actually flip the board over here. Here we can actually see the plane of inertia relative to, and it's the lowest pressure mediation, or the maximum throw against, use the word throw, the maximum pressure mediation against which the centrifugal divergent magnetic and centripetal convergent increasing inertia and acceleration towards right here, the null point of counter space right here, the plane of inertia right here. This actually sits, here's the dielectric, which is the centripetal, and this is the centrifugal magnetic, this vector and this vector. Okay, right here. We have opposite to the hyperboloid and the torus, and these two are the conjugate geometries of the universe, the hyperboloid, the hourglass shape, and the toroid, or the donut shape. Opposite to those at 45 degrees and 90 degrees to the dielectric, but this is the only place where life exists. Let me actually wipe this out. I don't know if you've actually seen this geometry before, but let's actually take a look at this geometry in simplexia. And by the way, you need to become familiar with the right-hand rule. None of this will actually become, you know, even slightly apparent or understandable unless you understand the right-hand rule. Right-hand rule is just simply saying pressure mediation, kind of like saying water flows down the tub in your bathtub when you pull the cork, right? Lowest pressure mediation is the water wants to seek the lowest point. That's the plumber's motto, is that crap flows downhill. I think that's the plumber's motto. Here we actually have increasing inertia and acceleration. Centripetal convergence, this of course is right along the hyperboloid here, increasing inertia and acceleration to the plane of inertia. Everything out here, of course, is space, space, space. These four S vectors are, of course, the four vectors of the toroid, the torus. If I actually draw this out without making the chalkboard too busy, these would be the four vectors of space. To say magnetism and to say creates space, and also to say creates time, is one and the same thing. To say magnetism and to say creates space, and also to say creates time, is one and the same thing. Here we have the actual vectors of counter space, centripetal convergence, the actual geometry, and this conjugate geometry of the torus and the hyperboloid. The negative image of a torus is a hyperboloid, the negative image of a hyperboloid is a torus. We actually have the vectors here of counter space, but all life exists. You notice that this is 45 degrees, 45 degrees, 45 degrees, 45 degrees, 45 degrees, 45, 45. Yeah, I think I made that simple. The plane of inertia, right here. This is the inverse. This is the lowest pressure mediation. In other words, this is the calm from the storm, the shelter from the storm.